A pathologist steals Albert Einstein's brain. But was his obsession science or madness? On April 18, 1955, the world mourned the passing of one of the greatest minds of all time, Albert Einstein. The man who rewrote the laws of the universe, whose iconic image with his tongue out was a symbol of genius and rebellion. But what few know is that his story did not end with his death. Indeed, for a crucial part of him, it was only the beginning of an incredible, secret, and deeply disturbing journey. Today we will take you into the abyss of an ethically controversial decision, the story of a brain and the man who guarded it, or perhaps desecrated it, for half a century. Albert Einstein was dead. As per his wishes, his body was to be cremated and his ashes scattered in a secret location to prevent it from becoming an object of veneration. No tombs, no relics, a desire for simplicity that reflected his entire life. But there was a hitch, a small, huge detail that no one had foreseen. Dr. Thomas Harvey, the pathologist on duty at Princeton Hospital, had other ideas. While performing the autopsy in a bold and completely unauthorized act, he removed Einstein's brain. He weighed it, measured it, photographed it from every angle, and then preserved it. He put it in a jar of formalin and took it home. Why? His justification was the noblest possible. He hoped that one day science would be able to study the genius's brain to reveal the secrets of his extraordinary intelligence. Imagine the shock when Einstein's family discovered what had happened. Hans Albert Einstein, the eldest son, was naturally furious. But Harvey, with an almost maniacal persistence, managed to convince him that his intention was purely scientific, that he would dedicate his life to this study for the good of humanity. Reluctantly, Hans Albert gave his permission, but on one strict condition. The brain was to be used only for scientific purposes, and there was to be no attempt at profit or sensationalism. It was a solemn promise, a pact made between the pain of a family and the ambition of a doctor. But Harvey perhaps had no idea how much that pact would shape and destroy his very existence. Dr. Harvey was not a world famous scientist, he was an ordinary pathologist, perhaps with too great an ambition. After removing the brain, he sectioned it into about 240 blocks, each about 1 centimeter through, and immersed them in celloidin, a plastic-like substance, to preserve them. Each block was then further sliced into hundreds of very thin slices, ready to be studied under the microscope. It was meticulous, almost reverential work. But the problem was that initially Harvey didn't have a laboratory, a team, or the funds to conduct in-depth research on such a precious and sensitive material. His action, though motivated by scientific curiosity, had immediate consequences. He was fired from Princeton Hospital for refusing to return the brain. In an instant, the custodian of Einstein's brain became a scientific pariah with a priceless relic but nowhere to conduct his promised research. And this is where the story takes a truly surreal turn. Dr. Harvey, with his jars containing the precious fragments, began a personal odyssey, a kind of self-imposed exile. He moved from Princeton to Philadelphia, then to the Midwest to Kansas. Einstein's brain followed him everywhere. He kept it in a trunk, in an apple cider container, in a cardboard box, in glass jars stored in a dark room, sometimes even in the trunk of his car. It became a bizarre traveling companion, a weighty secret that defined his life. For Harvey, the brain was a kind of burden and an obsession, his only hope for scientific immortality. But science, meanwhile, was evolving, and the techniques for studying the brain remained rudimentary for its means. Decades passed. Harvey divorced his wife, who at one point threatened to throw away the jars containing his brains. He lost other jobs. His medical license was revoked. His personal and professional life fell apart, all while his precious yet cumbersome collection of fragments of genius remained with him. From time to time, he sent small portions of his brain to select researchers around the world, hoping they might uncover the secret of Einstein's intelligence. But most of these studies were isolated, sometimes contested, and never led to any groundbreaking discoveries that could justify his bold initial move. One of the most famous studies was conducted by Marion Diamond of the University of California at Berkeley in the 1980s. Analyzing slices of Einstein's brain, he found that he had a higher proportion of glial cells, cells that support neurons in some areas, compared to a control brain. The discovery was interesting, but it did not provide a definitive key to genius. It was like looking at a big clock and noticing that a certain gear is more polished without understanding the complexity of the entire mechanism. The story of Dr. Harvey and Einstein's brain periodically resurfaced in the media, fueling legend and mystery. Harvey, now an elderly man, often found himself talking about his treasure, proudly showing off jars of brain slices to onlookers and reporters, sometimes even taking them out of a beer cooler. The promise of using it only for scientific purposes in silence and with rigor had been gradually eroded by his solitary life and the burden of his custody. The culmination of this bizarre odyssey came in 1998 when Harvey, now 87, decided to make one last journey. Accompanied by journalist Michael Paternity, he got into a Buick Skylark and drove across America to return the brain, or at least what was left of it, to Evelyn Einstein, Albert's adoptive granddaughter. It was a surreal journey, with the brain of the greatest scientist of the 20th century traveling in the trunk of a car between eccentric conversations and unexpected encounters. Eventually, Harvey delivered most of the remaining fragments to Princeton University Medical Center, the site from which they had been stolen decades earlier. Part of it is now on display at the National Museum of Health and Medicine. Thus, Einstein's brain, from a potential object of study, had transformed into an almost mystical relic, the symbol of a human obsession with genius and its mystery. The question remains, was Thomas Harvey a misunderstood visionary, driven by a thirst for knowledge beyond the bounds of ethics, or a mere grave robber who used his position to steal a part of a man for his own personal glory? His life, marked by failure and isolation, suggests that the weight of that relic was more of a burden than an honor. The story of Albert Einstein's brain is a powerful reminder of how far human curiosity, or perhaps obsession, can take us. It questions us about the limits of postmortem bioethics, about respect for the wishes of the deceased, and about our insatiable hunger to explain the inexplicable. Ultimately, Einstein's genius was not contained in those cells, but in his ability to see the world differently, to ask questions that no one else had dared. And that mystery, perhaps, is better left as such.